It's good if they tell you that your idea is stupid. It's good if it's too early and they give you feedback on something too early. But the problem is if what the client wants is not right, that's not your fault.
Hmm.
You need to change things 10,000 times. And it's much, much better for you to iterate early and fail fast and change the idea before you spend $1 million.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Tammy Podcast. Tammy is an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. Today, our guest is Andrew Cohen, founder and CEO of Brainscape. Andrew, hello. I know it's morning in New York. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm also good. It's already evening in Ukraine. So, before talking about Brainscape, Andrew, could you please describe yourself in one word?
Obsessed.
It's obvious that my next question is why exactly this word?
For over 15 years, I've had a singular focus and mission, and that is to optimize how people learn, optimize the speed at which they learn, the efficiency with which they learn, the permanence with which new knowledge and skills are retained. And I feel like our human capacity is 100 times the level of efficiency that we're currently learning right now, and we just have so much innovation left to do that I can't stop thinking about it.
Great, thank you. So let's now concentrate on the learning, as you've mentioned already. So let's talk about your company, Brainscape. What was the driving force that inspired you to start your own company?
I wanted the product for myself. I was living in Panama working with the World Bank in 2006, and I had to get very good at Spanish. My job was very controversial. It was an anti-corruption project, and I was being interviewed for Panamanian TV news in Spanish about my project. And I was 25 at the time, and it was embarrassing for me to have to pause and conjugate verbs in my head or forget vocabulary words. And so I wanted to learn a lot faster. I was using other language software at the time. I had books, I had classes, I had a degree and a minor in Spanish from university, and none of it was good enough for me. So I created the first version of the product myself in Microsoft Excel. I created a macro in Visual Basic to help drill me on verbs and vocabulary. And that just worked so well for me that friends of mine started asking for my program, not just for Spanish, but even in Panama, at the University of Panama, in the Masters in Public Administrations program and biology programs. People wanted to put in their own questions and answers and quiz themselves in that way. So that motivated me to go back and get my master's degree in education technology and learn how to turn this into a real product and commercialize it.
Great. So, actually, have you used your today's product in your, I don't know, ordinary day-to-day life?
I have. I've used it for French,
Mhm.
both when I lived in Martinique. So after the Panama project, and I was able to learn French from scratch, but still took too much work because I was having to create all the content myself.
Mhm.
And so what I realized is if I'm going to be able to use the product for more subjects, or if other people are going to use it for more subjects, they shouldn't need to do the work themselves to make all the content, all the flashcards. We should have curriculum available, and the smart learners and educators of the world can contribute to creating and curating that content to be available in what we now call, a decade later, the knowledge genome. We
Mhm.
want to map the world of everything that is learnable, or more specifically for the current version of our product, um, studyable, right, memorizable, into the most atomic bite-sized format that can be studied efficiently on any web or mobile device. So yes, I've used it for myself, but more importantly, I've as a user helped envision how it can be made available for more people.
Coming back to 2011, what fears, doubts, and concerns did you have at the beginning?
I didn't have strong technical leadership. I didn't have a strong technical co-founder at my company. And this may or may not be what you guys want to hear. But sort of the mistake that I made is I took my entire life savings of money and I spent it all on software development firms overseas. And I was managing them personally. And I didn't have a product or engineering background. I thought I was a brilliant product designer, right? I had a master's degree in education technology now, and I had smart kind of metrics and financial background. But if I could start again before I hired kind of overseas talent, I would have found a CTO, a founding CTO. And then maybe we could have or should have, hired good talent overseas. But, software development firms are really, really great at building what the client wants. And so if the client says, here's the spec, here's, 50 pages, here's exactly what I want. The software development firm, if you find a good one, like you guys, I'm sure you will do a perfect job doing what the client wanted. But the problem is if what the client wants is not right, that's not your fault. The client needs, better support. And so I think, if there's any technical, non-technical founders out there, right? Business founders, you've got an idea. Before you just say, oh, let me find some firm overseas, maybe it'll be cheaper than finding someone in the US or something like that. You should first find technical leadership of your own. And then when you do, hire a firm, you're going to be able to do a better job. You're going to create a better product that's more successful. That's going to enable you to hire even more talent, both at your company domestically and or overseas, through expanding your relationship with your development partner.
How much time you've spent to find that right team?
It's been 13 years and I'm still working on it. My biggest job is team building and recruiting. For those first several years, probably for the first 5 or 6 years, I was constantly turning over new technical leadership. I myself, transparently didn't have the strong background that the world's best CTOs, would want to work for, right? I hadn't founded a big company before. I didn't have sort of the geek cred of having, been an engineer myself. I didn't have tons and tons of money to entice them with very high salaries. So I just wasn't able to attract the best talent very early. And so, yeah, the first 5 or 6 years was very difficult. And then the company almost went out of business and so for 2 or 3 years, it was only me and one other person left trying to turn things around. And so since that tough period in like 2016, we've been rebuilding the team, this time profitably, this time without needing investor money, this time having learned almost a decade of lessons. And now we're back up to 30 people globally, which I'm very, very proud of the team we have right now, and it's continuing to grow. My version of an MVP early on was probably too big. I was so nervous that if we launched too early or with something that was too small, that we wouldn't have enough momentum and that somebody else with more resources, could easily copy the idea. And so I was obsessed with the first version had to have all the features. And if I could go back and change that, I would have been much less concerned that somebody would copy the idea. That typically doesn't happen as much as first-time entrepreneurs think. And I would have spent a lot more time validating what are the most important features to build and designing non-functional wireframes and testing them with users in many more rounds before even writing a single line of code, before even writing a single technical spec, and building the much smaller MVP that can actually get traction and actually be worth building additional features around.
And what about technologies? What tech stack do you have?
Right now, we're Ruby on the back end and React for the middle of the stack, front end, as well as React Native for the mobile app, both Android and iOS.
Was it always the same, or maybe at some moment you've switched to another language?
Yeah, at the very beginning it was Java for the back end, and we wrote the iOS app in just native Objective-C because there wasn't really a great cross-platform development stack for mobile. I guess there was sort of Titanium and Appcelerator. There was a few attempts at sort of that write once, run anywhere. But it wasn't really until React Native that such a thing existed. And so starting in around 2016, we began rebuilding the app in React Native, first actually releasing it on Android, and then gradually getting it to the point where it had enough features to match what we had on iOS, and finally replace the legacy iOS app with the new React Native app on iOS.
What is the biggest challenge you faced during your path?
Simple is hard. Making something that is simple for the user, simple as a simple code base, simple as a simple business model that can be communicated to investors is very difficult. Especially when you're starting with a concept such as the science of learning or the knowledge graph of everything learnable in the world that is so complex. How do you take so much complexity and make it as simple as possible to the user, to the employee, and to the investors in the market? That's a very tough challenge, but something that I feel like I'm suited to do because of my background and things that I've done before. Excited about the next decade of continuing to face this largest challenge.
Do you feel high competition on the market nowadays?
Yes and no. There are a lot of alternative ways that people can study, both online and on paper. I don't think that there are any competitors who are doing anything close to really what we are doing for the medium term, and which makes me increasingly confident that once we finally give birth to a lot of the things that we've been working on for the last few years that we're just starting to release, that we're going to have strong enough momentum and a moat protecting us that will help us stand up above the competition.
Okay, and some question about the future. What are your predictions for the e-learning industry?
There has been a strong push recently in the last 10 or 15 years toward a lot more collaboration, social learning. All those things I think are very important, but I think a lot of it has been at the expense of very good self-study. And I think that COVID started to help, but other forces will continue to help push the pendulum back toward the importance of self-study as not just more efficient from a cognitive science standpoint, learning more with less time, but also something that is economically efficient, because teachers are expensive, their time is expensive. We're seeing increasing teacher shortages now, and the more that the process of studying and just sort of memorizing and retaining can be outsourced to the technology, the better the scarce human teacher resources can be used to foster the social emotional learning skills and collaboration and even, one-on-one time with students, right? You don't need a teacher in a synchronous classroom or Zoom or whatever teaching or instructing kind of one-to-many lesson, because that's inefficient for everybody, but that's still how the majority of education is delivered, unfortunately. So self-study, I think, is going to become an increasing theme in the future of education.
And what do you think about the artificial intelligence?
I think it's a little bit overhyped, especially artificial general intelligence is pretty overhyped, and I think it's going to be a component of e-learning, but I think it is particularly useful when there is a very discrete problem to be solved, and existing algorithms are no longer able to be optimized by humans. So, for example, math questions, right? Like, how do you deliver the perfect next level of math question, based on the student's current level of mastery? People have written lots of math problems and algorithms, right, that determine if the student gets number, 3 wrong in a row, then it's the perfect time to, show them a remedial question of this level. And, there's such a constant feedback loop, right? The students getting it right or wrong, that's a binary thing. And, the level or type of question that's being asked, that's such a perfect thing to train a machine learning model for. So you can, for that very discrete thing, how do you improve, arithmetic, problems? I think, sure, AI very much can improve that. But for the holistic picture of what pathway should a learner be on, what career skills do they need to be developing, even at an earlier age, I think, the real world, the knowledge that is needed, the skills that are needed changes so quickly that it wouldn't even be efficient for AI to try to, control the meta pathway. That's where human educators and counselors really shine. So I think AI will be, very much a component of education, just like it is for lots of other discrete issues, optimizing airline prices, very, very discrete things. But I don't think it's going to take over the world. And I don't think it's going to take over education in the way that some bulls are suggesting it may.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense. Could you please share with us what are your plans for next 2 years in your company?
First and foremost, remain capital efficient. As we know, the markets are continuing to change. Right now, we're late 2022. Brainscape is a profitable company. We have been for several years, but if we become unprofitable, we recognize that the access to outside capital that could bail us out is a lot harder to come by right now. So we're being extra cautious there. But at the same time, smartly building the foundation by which we can expand the business far beyond flashcards. Flashcards have been adaptive flashcards with spaced repetition have been our foundation for over 10 years. But that doesn't mean, for the next 20 years, Brainscape wants to be a flashcard company. Brainscape is an adaptive learning company that is focused on self-study. And so using that underlying flashcard asset that we have, the user experience, the addictive and effective learning platform that has so many users, how can we continue to expand upon that to reinvent learning from the inside out? So supplementing flashcards with the rest of the learning experience, the lessons, the videos, the assessments, where flashcards, the self-study component is just sort of at the center, rather than as an afterthought, which has been traditionally made, is the path that we're on. And I think the next 2 years is going to really help define that as we do it in a cautious and capital efficient way.
I'm confident that you will manage to do all of this. I thought that you post videos with learning tips on YouTube channel.
Yeah.
In your mind, what is the most useful tip in the learning process?
Play the whole game first, meaning try and fail to accomplish the full goal so that you have a picture of what you're trying to do. Say it differently, let's say you're learning for the bar exam. You haven't hardly studied anything, right? You're a beginner law student.
Mhm.
Try to take a bar exam. Try to write an essay question that answers something, and you're going to fail so miserably, right? You're trying to, you're becoming a doctor. Try to diagnose the patient. Try to, do a fake, rotation or some kind of a simulation where you're in the emergency room and all these things are happening. That is going to help drive your learning in so many ways. It's going to, number one, help you decide, are you on the right path to begin with, right? Is this something I want to be doing? It's sort of a simulation. It gives you the motivation. If it is something that you want to do, you want to learn, and that kind of changes your mindset to learn more deliberately, and that's going to make the knowledge stick so much better. And it also gives you the context with which to be learning, so that you can apply later. I mean, the same as, for you're learning guitar, you want to be a blues rock star, try to play the hardest blues song. Take a tutorial on YouTube. It's going to take you 10 hours to get it right, and then maybe you could sort of play it and you have no idea why it works. You have no idea, what those notes even were, what the chords were that you were doing the shapes for. You don't know anything about the music theory, but why it works. But try the hard thing first and then back out and learn the components. And I feel like a lot of the way that learning is delivered nowadays is the exact opposite of that. You learn all of the components of something, whether it's science, right? You're learning all the species of mollusks for the sake of learning the species of mollusks. You don't know why you're learning it. You say, why do I care about this? And then maybe in college or afterward, then you figure out, okay, what career do I want to pursue? What jobs do I want to look at? And it's the exact opposite of how we should be learning.
Thank you. It's honestly really motivational. Being an entrepreneur is always a risk and fear. What are your recommendations for young entrepreneurs?
Don't do it. I'm just kidding. Tell everybody you meet about your idea and ask them for advice, feedback, and introductions. It is never too early. It's so fascinating how every first-time entrepreneur, almost 100% of, are afraid to tell people about their idea because they think somebody's going to copy their idea, because maybe they're afraid somebody's going to tell them the idea is stupid, because they're too early and they're too embarrassed. They don't want to share anything until they have something a little bit better. So they stay in their basement for months and months or years building this beautiful product, by themselves, before they share it with the world. And every single second-time entrepreneur that I've met says if they can go give themselves one piece of advice, it would be this. It would be just tell everybody, nobody's going to steal your idea. It's good if they tell you that your idea is stupid. It's good if it's too early and they give you feedback on something too early. It's going to stress you out, and you're gonna stay awake at night now wondering whether it was a good idea to begin with, because somebody poked holes in it early. But those things are part of the process, and you need to change things 10,000 times, and it's much better for you to iterate early and fail fast and change the idea before you spend $1 million on a software development firm in Ukraine to build something that was the wrong product. And better for you to iterate on getting the concept right, so that when you spend $1 million on that software development firm in the Ukraine, it's going to be the right product and it's going to be successful, and it's going to make Timmy look even better.
Thank you. Actually, it was my last question. So we are going to finish our interview. I want to thank you for this conversation.